Hi everyone, I'm not able to be there today, so we are going to do this online. And I'm going to start off on this slide because I know one of the periods, I think it was seventh or eighth, ended here. So if you are someone who is in fourth or sixth period and has this information already, you may forward to where you need to go where we left off. So we ended here, which was looking at the neuron, which is the nerve cell. And what I had everybody do is just look over your vocab and make sure that you have the correct vocab for dendrites and axons. And then just take a moment to kind of look and identify on the neuron where these structures are. So we see the cell body, which is the main structure there. It kind of looks like a funky looking thing with an eyeball. The nucleus is in the middle. The dendrites are kind of like hairs. That's how they look anyway, sticking out, and they receive the messages. It goes to the cell body, and then the message is sent along the axon. And the axon is kind of an elongated fiber, almost like, think of it like a tail, that sends the message away to the next neuron. If you see here, we have this sheath. If you think of a cord that you would plug in for an electrical device, it also has like that protective plastic coating around it. And if you've ever had like a dog chew the wire or a wire cracks and you see some of the electrical wires hanging through, obviously that's not safe because the sparks from the electrical messages can kind of go all over the place. So same thing with your neurons. You want this sheath to be in place to kind of keep everything flowing the way that it needs to go. But there can be issues with this sheath, and we're going to look at that with the immune system. Next is the synapse. So on the back of your notes where you have all your labeling, there is a question on the bottom. It kind of shows you a picture of a synapse, and it says, what is a synapse? So you want to write the space between two neurons. So here you'll see the dendrite of one neuron and the little ends of the axon of other neurons. And you'll see here that they connect almost like a puzzle piece, but they don't touch. And we have this space here for a reason. And it's so not only that messages can pass through, but that the message can be changed. And those little receptor sites are, that you can kind of see, they look like little, let me see right here, these little dots right here. We're going to talk about those tomorrow, and I will give you some information about those. But those receptor sites, when they get plugged in, they can alter the message that's being sent. So when we look at neurons, they are basically grouped into two main categories: sensory or motor neurons. Sensory neurons send messages to the brain from the sense organs. So basically think about, this being like an information highway. The sensory neurons take everything that's going on that you're receiving, and they basically are flowing in one direction to the brain. Motor neurons are the opposite. They're sending messages to muscles and glands from the brain. So your sensory neurons are heading one direction, your motor neurons are sending messages in the other direction. And that makes sense because if they were doing both, I think messages would get kind of crossed and it would be a big mess. So same team, they look exactly the same, different job. I think of like a football team and the positions on the team. And when you look at everybody in the uniform, they all look the same. So the neurons all look the same here, but they have a different job. Now go to the front page and you will see where it says listing diseases and disorders. So the first one you're going to write is migraine, and you should write the disease and then list the definition that I give for it or some basic information. So a migraine is headache associated with vomiting and sensitivity to light and sound. And it's kind of just like the worst headache ever, basically. So you have a migraine when you don't just have a headache, but you have other symptoms that go along with it. So a headache, usually you take some Tylenol, you can still function, but a migraine, for some people, they can't function. If they're working or they're at school, they may have to stop what they're doing and go home. They may not be able to drive. And so there are a lot of different causes of this. Generally, they call them triggers. And it would be things like stress, change in sleep patterns, too much sleep, not enough sleep. It could be different chemicals that we're exposed to, especially in our foods. Believe it or not, there are a lot of chemicals and preservatives in our foods. So if you start getting migraines, one of the things doctors may recommend right off the bat is kind of keeping a diary of what, you did that day prior to the migraine that could have caused it. And when you see patterns, you then kind of get an idea what your triggers are. There are prescription medications that you can take. So it's something that over time, if you talk to your doctor about, they can get you on medication to help with this if that is necessary. Next, another major neurological disorder, and I believe the most recent statistics is it's the number 5 killer in the US. It went down from number 4. So strokes, it's basically, when you think about a heart attack being like loss of blood flow to the heart muscle, it's kind of the same idea, but to your brain. So it's a loss of blood flow to the brain. And we know that cells in our body need blood to thrive and be functioning because it has oxygen. So when we don't have blood, we don't have oxygen. When we don't have oxygen, cells die. When cells die, especially in the brain, then things start to shut down and our functioning becomes very limited. So there's 2 types of strokes. One is formed by a clot. And so something happens inside that vessel that basically clogs the vessel. And another one is when there is bleeding. So generally the blood vessel is somehow disrupted and may even burst, and then bleeding occurs inside or around the brain. So the video at Edpuzzle gives you some of the symptoms. The main symptoms would be generally on one side of the body. The person is going to have symptoms where their face might be kind of droopy. So looking at their face, they may have arm weakness, or just things are really disoriented as far as their movements with their arm, especially on one side. They may have vision issues. That is another one. So just kind of being aware of those symptoms and reacting very, very quickly. It can happen to people of any age. I know we have a teacher here at school that had a toddler that had a stroke. Very young people can have strokes. A lot of times, though, we associate it with somebody who is older. And the last one I get a lot of questions about is brain tumors. And there are situations where tumors may occur in our brain, and they can be benign, which is not cancerous, or they can be malignant, which means they are cancerous. Obviously, the second one would definitely be more of a riskier situation. A lot of times, if they're benign, they're not growing as fast and don't often require surgery, and can be something that they just keep an eye out. Although there's probably some symptoms that could be occurring, they can be controlled. Malignant, if it's cancerous, is generally continuing to grow and kind of taking up some of that brain matter area and causing major symptoms. So depending on where it's at, they may be able to do surgery and other treatments. And if not, that's something that you would discuss with your doctor as far as other treatments that are available if it's not able to be operated on. So ways to keep this system healthy: avoid harmful chemicals or drugs. Don't dive in shallow water. It seems really silly to say that. Like, why would anybody do that? But it happens more often than you think, especially, when you're adding, like, maybe there's a party and people are drinking. They're just not really in the right senses to judge the depth of the water or what they're doing. So just being really cautious of that, and making sure that you get enough sleep at night, wearing a helmet, and wearing a seatbelt. Last is a map of the blood flow to the brain. So I'm just going to end here so you can check this out. You don't have to write anything. And we'll discuss this more tomorrow and watch a video on it. All right, you can get started on your quiz.